And, um, I did a live yesterday. I just had this realization that it's so easy to go like 90 miles an hour,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
And so many of us want to stop going 90 miles an hour, but we don't want to stop going 90 miles an hour to change directions, right? Like it's like we want the change, but we don't want to slow down to make the change, right?
Yeah.
And so we feel like we're just driving, hoping that like the road will change and we'll end up in a different direction. And so I feel like I'm in a space right now where I'm having the opportunity to slow down and really experience what that feels like so that I can pivot directions, which is really exciting. So all is well. How are you?
I'm really well as well. And I love that you said that, because here's what's real today. Like, even as you know, before jumping on this scheduled time, life just seems to keep coming like this. And it's exactly what you're talking about, right? So we're like, yes, I can do this. Yes, I'm committed to this. Yes, this too. And we find ourselves in some moments scrambling to get it all done. And then we're like, slow down and it'll be great, right? And at the same time, we're telling ourselves that, but our bodies are still trying to shove it all in. So we're in this conflict. And what I've learned in this transformational work and just tuning into ourself is I'm good at a certain speed. Like, I even like a little excitement from having things back to back,
Right.
but not every day and not all the time. And in those moments, whenever I'm like, sure, I'm good, right? Life, universe kind of throws more things in, or then that one little degree of twist where one appointment took longer, or the traffic was backed up, or there's cones on your regular drive home. And it's such a sign to just be like, where are you? What's happening? What do you need in this moment? What are you freaking yourself out about? Because that's where our mind goes, like, oh my God. And all of that is internal conversation, when all we really have to do is just check in with, what do I need in this moment? And as an example, running in to record this was literally down to, I have 2 minutes to pee even.
Right.
I'm like, oh, I did it again. I didn't schedule lunch, or, all those things. And I'm actually okay in this moment because I know in a little bit I can eat. But how often do we do that in our day? And all I had to do was go, okay, I was so worried about what you were going to think or what was going to happen or not making this time happen. And then that can start to spin. And that's just all it takes, like one little shift or thought. And all I really had to do was just communicate and say, hey, here's where I'm at. Is this still good for you? Be accepting if it was, and being accepting if it wasn't. And just trusting that whatever happened was meant to happen. So
Amen.
it's so timely that you're saying that, and so real for so many women, dads, kids, and they don't know what they don't know. So
I think we think that operating, and I'll speak for myself, I thought that operating that way and being stressed out and being anxious and scheduling, like every time I find myself in one of those positions like you were in, like if the cone's getting derailed, if the traffic, I mean, I used to live in Atlanta, right? I know you live in California, and I don't know the traffic in Chico specifically, but in Atlanta, in LA, right? In bigger cities, like if I have scheduled my day such that something like traffic can completely spiral me and cause me to melt down, that's a sign for me that I'm overbooked. Like that's
Amen.
indicator for me to be like, okay, I literally, and I remember it was probably maybe a year ago that the concept of actually scheduling in buffer time was first introduced to me. And now this is actually the first week in a while, right? Because I know you and I have talked about this before, where we do something and then we're like, oh yeah, I forgot about that thing that I knew. And I literally schedule 30 minutes buffer time around all of my calls. So if they go long, or if something is behind, or they start late, like I have a little bit of room. And if they end on time and everything is well, I have time to get up and go outside and go for a walk or, play with my dogs or get something to eat. And I did not do that. I mean, there were so many days, Michelle, where I had calls scheduled at 8, at 9, at 10, 11, 12, like all the way through. And I'm thinking, this is insane. And the brain, at least for me, can convince myself that I'm accomplishing so much and I'm doing all this stuff, but I'm like stressed out and anxious and on edge. And who am I really serving in that energetic space? You get your girls at school with like a meltdown freak out, right? Get in the car!
It's but as humans, we're operating this way all the time. And so many of us we know this work and we still find ourselves in patterns because they're so automated now, right? And the simplest answer is usually, what's your calendar look like?
Right.
I'll be transparent, like switching from office work and always being in my office so I could almost control the environment with where I was and what I could do and take on. Not that that makes it any better in this situation because it was just more piles, right? To owning a calendar, my kids' calendar, free time, like all of a sudden I had resistance to the calendar, yet I was very proud of my client calendar because that was the most important one until client times started to impede with other things. I forgot to build the time in, it's a learning process, right? But it's a metaphor for life because there's always one more thing. There's always the groceries that you didn't get to or the dinner you need to prep for. And tell me if this is you as well. Like, I don't know why, but Wednesdays and Thursdays traditionally have been the busiest, to where if you have a crock pot and you can hit go and you pre-plan, like that's a good thing come 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, right? It's just real. And my week is this way because I'm leaving on Friday, so the week gets shortened and I'm so excited. And so you've got all these emotions that aren't necessarily anger or sadness or frustration. They're just, it is what it is until I get to the next thing. And that's important to recognize because how much are we accepting that looks sexy in my brain's way of saying, hey, this is still the old thing. This is what you're used to doing, but I've just colored it different now and can find myself in those same patterns until the moment where I get frustrated or worn down or one more trip to school. I want to fall asleep on the way there. Like, what's the determining factor? And it's been the doing, all the doing. Instead of
you have to notice, I was talking with a client earlier today, and so much of this can't be learned in theory, right? We can plan our schedule. And I'll give you an example. I just got back from a retreat last week, I think it was, and I didn't plan buffer time afterward. Now I know better. I know better. That's something that I've learned about myself. If I'm getting home from a coaching retreat or even an event like you're going to this weekend, I like having the following day, right? So if I get home on Monday, I like taking Tuesday off, but I convinced myself, it's only a couple of days. I'll be fine. I'll be okay. And then that day after came, and instead of, and this is where the progress is, and this is what I heard in you, which I think is so awesome to celebrate, is that instead of the self-abuse and the inner critic and the beating up and I should have known better, it's like, oh, okay, this is why I make that choice. This is why I say no to scheduling afterward. And I have to remind myself, and I would love to know if this is something that you get as well with the work that we are so blessed to do. There's this desire on my heart to serve, and I have to remember that if I'm tired, I haven't rested and haven't given myself the time to integrate after any kind of travel, whether even if it's vacation, right? It takes time. Even if you go away to the mountains with your family, you come back and there's laundry and there's stuff. A lot of times we need a minute before we get back into work. And if I don't do that, yes, I'm not telling people no, but am I really showing up for them?
Right.
And for me, having that awareness and having the feeling and messing it up, right? By being like, dang it, you know better than this. But then saying, okay, I'm going to be traveling again this week. What do I have the opportunity to do differently this time? And I don't know about you, but telling people when it's something that I love to do, saying no, that's hard for me. Like I was having to email clients this morning and be like, hey, I have to cancel our call next week. Can we reschedule for the following week? And there's a part of me that I'm like, well, I could probably do it. This is real, Michelle. I could probably do it if I got up at 6 o'clock in the morning and
Oh yeah.
And I was like, Michelle, that's ridiculous. Are you really going to help them at 6 o'clock in the morning your time? Like you don't wake up that early to coach, right? Like, but that was real for me this morning. I was like, I could probably do it.
And I think that's what I love most is having the opportunity to catch my own brain in action with the knowledge that we know. And I get silly geeky about, like, you know, half hour ago, I was like, you know, then I'm just kind of like, okay, check in, right? Like being able to just say check in.
Right.
Just a heads up. This is where I'm at. This is where it's going. Not be attached to the outcome. Be opening to, you know, to any pivot that might happen. And it doesn't mean like, oh, I'm a terrible person, and then let the cycle keep going, right? Like it's just life. And if there's anything that my passion is in teaching women, and I'll just even say my age, and you can tell me since we have different worlds, right? Like, do you meet women of even younger ages with the same thing as I sometimes come across as well, where they're working so hard to be doing all the things and accomplishing all the things, they're forgetting what they need to be the most whole.
Always.
And then that's in so much habit that that's not even a consideration.
Yeah, we don't even realize it's a problem. I was talking with a friend of ours a couple weeks ago, and we were speaking about how it's become so, we're talking about something different, but the concept applies, that it's become so ingrained in our society and in our programming that we almost don't even realize that it's a problem. Like, it's not even like we're out of alignment and we know it. Like, we just think that it's normal. I was actually writing and recording a video about this before our call today, which, by the way, that's beautiful, right? There's always divine timing. You're running late, and I had the opportunity to do something that's been on my list. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Doctor's office and traffic cones and appointments. I appreciate you. And the truth is that so many of these behaviors, especially, and you know, I don't have children, but I see this especially for moms. There's like this thing that it's like, if you're not feeling that way, right,
you're
then
failing.
Yeah, like you're failing. Like if you're not miserable and stressed out, then you're doing something wrong. You don't love your kids enough, or you're not sacrificing.
How selfish of you. Oh,
to be at peace and happy.
Yeah, like fit, or like, I don't know, into whatever it is, right? And it's usually just a reflection of what we're not giving ourselves. Which is, I mean, I can just already tell you there's 10 other conversations just within this little bit that we're doing, right? Like, it's so good because we're so human. And there's always a place to learn. There's always a way for us to tune back in and holding space. What is today? Today is the 10 days ago, I had a workshop here in Chico I had 18 women come, and the whole presence behind the workshop was to just slow down and observe what that feels like. Because I have tendencies to still be the woman who can do it all, because I always have. But there's this bigger calling to slow down and tune into myself, to know myself on a different level that supersedes that. And it started with me literally slowing down enough to figure out what was going on, and then being brave enough to listen in when everything seemed like it was chattering, right? So we gave them an experience of restorative, delicious yoga where there's bolsters and props, and you're just laying and breathing outside, right, in this beautiful weather. And then introduced them to, some had meditation, some hadn't. We did a guided one just to allow yourself to be where you are. And for a moment, they each got to feel themselves being in that moment, away from everything else, because they knew they had 4 hours that they were right here. So it didn't matter what was presented, right?
Was that hard for many of the participants?
I asked after, and surprisingly, the majority of them were so excited about giving themselves that space, and the majority of them don't do it. So many of them do attend a yoga class from time to time, but a cohesive like chunk of time. 2 things happened, which was amazing. And we had some evaluation forms for feedback. And one was they couldn't believe it was over. 4 hours went like this.
Right.
Whatever the conversation was, because I opened up the conversation around the inner critic and just identifying what's happened. And we gave them permission for it to feel like this, right? And gave them permission for them to love it for being there, so they can just accept that it was there. And how much magic happens, even if you're sitting in a meditation and you're feeling all the thoughts. It's not about getting rid of the thoughts or making those go away. It's just about allowing them to kind of flow. And I always think when you can love them for being there, even if they feel anxious or crazy, whatever that is in that moment, when you acknowledge that they're there, like they'll dissipate. Mm-hmm. And when we fight it, they continue. Yeah, but to feel what that's like in your body, to sit with it long enough to just watch it disappear, and then realize you've lost all track of time. And the conversation, I mean, literally, Michelle, like facilitating this, everybody's like, and I'm thinking the whole time, is this making sense? Of course, right? Is this making sense? Is it cohesive? Is it going too deep? Because I had people of all different experiences, and I had hands raised saying, I want to go deeper. I want to go deeper. And so, I'm like, well, we may have to do some more of that. But we just kind of like gave them an experience of what it's like to acknowledge what's happening in your mind, acknowledge what it's like to slow down in your body, putting those together, where it's okay, where it doesn't feel okay, and what comes up in between. And that conversation, when you put women in a room and just allow them space to have conversations that they're not used to having, is so magical. In what's shared, you realize, oh, you go through that too? Yeah. Do you mean my anxiety doesn't have to be anxiety? It can just understand what's happening, and it can start to shift. Yeah. It's pretty powerful.
Very much so.
Grateful for that. We had so much feedback. We're throwing together another one before the weather turns too cold. We have, at least Northern California has a little pocket of warm and cool weather in the fall. And we're making it a full day so we can expand on the work, the transformational work.
I love that.
Which is so good, right?
Yeah.
So maybe for today, we have a short episode today, but maybe for today, let's just talk a little bit about why we do what we do and why we love it so much.
Sure. Yeah.
I'll let you start. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, I think it's what you just said in this conversation. It's about creating spaces for truth. I really believe that whole phrase of being set free by the truth setting us free, can only happen after we set the truth free. And that, I believe, requires safe and sacred space for that to happen. And that's why I love what I do. And my life started to really transform when in 2013 I just hit a place of, if I was going to be able to figure this out, I'd have done it, right? I'd been working for almost 40 years and I was working so hard, and it was like I felt like I was doing everything right, and I just like I was missing something, right?
Yeah.
Nothing was working, it felt like. And I had that moment of surrender of, you know what, if I was going to figure this out, I'd have figured this out by now. And I got to get some help. Like, I obviously need some kind of outside perspective. I've gotten this far, and that's fine. And I want to go further. And it's not even about the tangible success. I wanted to feel better, because I was achieving and I was successful, but I was miserable in the process and in the journey. And I just started to realize that that's not what it was about for me, and that's not how I wanted to live the rest of my life. And once I got the experience of the transformation and of what is really possible, and I think a lot of people, because I was there, we don't truly believe what's possible.
Yeah.
You know, we maybe heard about it, or we've seen other people, and we hear people say things like, oh my gosh, I'm so much better, I feel better, I'm happier, or I'm, you know, healing my relationships, or I don't have the inner critic anymore. Or you hear like Michelle talk about how she's really, you know, been able to just navigate the space that she was in today and check in with herself and feel good. And it's hard to really understand the distance from where that is now to where we were in the past. And I think a lot of people they just don't know what's possible. So my biggest passion is on helping people see that and advocating for their happiness, and for them to really understand that there is a way to unapologetically live in their truth, not being intentionally disruptive just for the sake of being disruptive, but being disruptive in their individuality and in the truth of who they are. And that I mean, that wakes me up early. It keeps me up late. I love it. I
I love,
absolutely love this work.
I love the smile that it puts on your face.
Uh,
He's talking about it. I've been told as well, like, you just light up when I don't know maybe what you're saying exactly, but you light up when you're saying it. And it's because it's just, you have to experience the transformational work, the neurotransformational work that we do is such an embodiment, right? It's not just in the mind. And it's, the mind has its own place. The body has its own place. They both talk, right? There's emotions and feelings in between, and all that gets shoved in over years and years and years of us not knowing where to put it or what to do with it, or that normal we're talking about earlier. And when we free it, when you identify, for me even, I'll speak for myself, when you identify what it was that drove the anger, what it was that drove the incessant need to lose 5 or 10 pounds, you know, all those things that we busy ourselves with. When you identify it, you feel it release, and it goes down to a root, and you're able to heal that root, you can't help but shift and change and grow. And that is not something you can talk about to experience, and that is not something you can read about to experience, but it is something you can experience.
I love that.
I love that so much. And that's what we're hoping, well, not even hoping, we are bringing to you as our audience, is just more experience of the transformation in our lives, in lives of others. The way it's awakened in our soul, you know, like our souls want to be freed so badly. And we do everything humanly possible to keep that misery and stress and overload and overwhelm so real for ourselves that we don't even know what it's like when we're freed. And I'm hoping within this podcast we're able to at least give some perspective and some insight and some aha moments, or some just holy shit moments, that this is real life. And you know, you and I have the same name. We have Michelle, and we have close to the same alphabet in our last name. And we have a lot of same experiences growing up but we're each unique individual humans, and therefore those experiences differ just enough to make it beautiful in the journey. And I'm really excited to be doing this work with you.
Likewise, my friend. Yeah, I'm excited just to open up the conversation and see what happens and see where things go and what's possible when people who really give a damn come together to hold space for other people who are looking for a tribe and for community and maybe for healing, maybe just for laughter or connection or girlfriend time, or maybe just to know that they're not alone, or maybe just to have a safe space to escape or have something that brings a smile to their face or offers a new perspective, as you said, when you're on your walk or playing with your kids or your dogs. I mean, just
test and see,
yeah,
try this, see if this works.
So good. Thank you for the conversation and for who you are in not only in this work for the people that you serve, Michelle, but for me in my life. I really appreciate the lessons that I've learned from you, and it's been really cool to see your growth and your willingness to just show up to serve without having to have necessarily all the I's dotted and all the T's crossed, and recognize that you can whip out the pen while you're in motion. It's inspiring to me, and I'm really honored that you thought to bring me into this conversation. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And heck yeah. I mean, I love every conversation we have, and I think they're worthy of sharing. And I thank you for being on the journey every ounce of this way these last almost 3 years.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm blessed, but now I get to share you, and I think it's fun. So I'm going to stick with our time today. So we will catch you guys next episode. Thanks for being here.
And so see you next time, or hear you, or you'll hear us.
See, watch, hear. We'll figure it out. It'll all be good.